Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am joined by Anthony Haggerty and Lawrence Connolly for the ACSOM Bulletin. Plenty to talk about. It's the aftermath of the transfer window, and we're asking, are you happy with Celtic's transfer business? I'll come to yourself first, Tony. What's your thoughts on the incomings and the outgoings at Celtic Park?
I think it was very much a damp squib, because most of the Celtic supporters were concerned with one thing and one thing only, and that was the removal of the manager. I think the majority of Celtic supporters were after that and couldn't really care less who was brought in and who was leaving. In terms of who was brought in, Jonjoe Kenny, 6-month loan, no forward planning there really, is there?
Absolutely not.
With no option to buy. They let a promising young goalkeeper go, I believe, Liam Hughes, to Liverpool. So again, you just look and think, what's going on? Olivier Ntcham to Marseille, and if you're to believe that Olivier Ntcham wanted to leave for 2 years, it was said. Neil Lennon said he wanted to leave for 2 years. Why is he still there? Why did they turn down, was it 17.5 million from Porto? Why turn that down? Whatever it was. And Frimpong to Leverkusen, well, that's fair enough. And the least said about the Ben Davies transfer failure, the better. I've never known a club that can't conclude a deal.
It's frustrating, Tony, because you're looking at the calibre of Ben Davies, and we spoke about it yesterday, and people say, Celtic were in a no-win situation. Kevin was talking about the power being with the player, and I do get that, but surely we can get these deals concluded quicker, and that's been a big criticism of Celtic under Peter Lawwell, hasn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, listen, if you want Ben Davies, you go and get Ben Davies. Ben Davies would have been an indication that you were actually planning for the future. Mm-hmm. Right? £2 million to me is not a lot of money, if that's what it costs. But again, it's that mentality. And you go back to it, you had the premise where the news was put out there that he had signed the deal and everybody's hopes were up. And then all of a sudden there's a snag, and as soon as you hear the word of a snag or it's not concluded, it takes you back to the most infamous deal in the club's history in '89 with Maurice Johnston, where they paraded him at Celtic Park and the deal hadn't been done. So again, a leakage of news to a certain media outlet to say this has been done when it clearly hadn't been done. Mm-hmm. And see if you're smart and you're clever, you know what Preston North End want for this guy. You know the ins and outs. That's when Brendan Rodgers came and he suddenly snapped up Moussa Dembele for 50 grand, sold him for 19 million quid. That's about knowing who's out there, what players are available. Can you get them yet? Go and get them. Go and do the deal. I've never known a club like it to drag their heels in so many transfer deals and can't conclude a business deal like Celtic. It's unbelievable, really.
It is. It's disappointing, and to use Neil Lennon's very, common phrase, it's bitterly disappointing, Tony. When you look at Ben Davies, and his name's been flying about. Lawrence, I'm going to come to you in a second because you're looking as though I'm ignoring you. But, his name's been flying about for a while. He's been connected to Celtic and linked with Celtic for some time. So there is a real sense of disappointment. And then you look at the fact that we need to be able to conclude these deals. The news that Jonjoe Kenny was coming, I think it was probably Lawrence that actually broke that to me on the WhatsApp group. And you look at him, comes with a great calibre, really chuffed that we've got a right back in. But as as you say again, where's the forward planning? We're getting a guy games for another team, really. We're getting games in his legs so that he can go back to Everton. Lawrence, what about your own thoughts? I mean, I'm going to come back to the young goalie that left, because that's part of a wider issue, I think, at Celtic, with the young guys leaving for all and sundry. But we'll come back to it, Tony. I'm glad you brought it up. Lawrence, what was your thoughts? January sometimes is quite underwhelming when it comes to transfers. But, we're at that stage where we're almost in purgatory. You've got a manager there who we're expecting to leave. You've got an incoming CEO. We're still doing business. And who's identifying the players? Who's having this final say? Who knows? What was your overall thoughts at the conclusion of the transfer window?
Desperate for a centre-half. We don't get Matt McKenzie. We don't get Ben Davies. You've got to get your first choice signings. Well, most clubs need to get their first choice signings. We don't. We always get our second, third, fourth, or no centre-halves. So we'll be playing Shane Duffy again, who costs us almost a goal a game. Frimpong going, great profit on him. He wants to go. Cham going, I'm not disappointed to see Cham going. A bit disappointed in the fees. That's what it says. Porto were willing to shell in big bucks a year or so ago. Goes cheaper. But, we're desperate for a centre-half. Everyone can see it. We've got it right back in. You're just like, what? Really?
Yeah. It reeks to me, Lawrence, you're bringing the right back in, let's move Ayer back into the centre, there's the problem solved. I mean, I do obviously watch the press conferences with Neil Lennon and others with interest, particularly Neil Lennon. Some may say I'm over-analysing it, but you need to try and get some kind of information from the manager. And, yesterday when he was asked about whether or not he would be going for a centre-half after the breakdown of the Ben Davies deal, he basically said, I'll be happy to run with what I've got. I mean, I just don't think we learn from our mistakes. All it takes, Tony, is another, injury to the likes of Duffy, who for me isn't playing well enough to be getting a starting jersey anyway, and we're going back to young players with very little experience.
Again, it goes back to what we've said from August, really, or before. There's been no forward planning this season at all, in any shape or form. No preparation for having a real tilt at the 10. Flying by the seat, I think you'll call it. Call it arrogance, call it complacency. And to all intents and purposes, it looks as if a lot of people seem to have chucked it and just want the season to peter out. If Celtic are in a fight to guarantee second place, that would be the ultimate slap in the face for this season if they cannot guarantee second place.
See, the big thing for me on that point, Tony, and it is a relevant point, I was looking at Aberdeen, obviously Cosgrove's away, and are they coming out stronger? Probably not. Obviously Wright's away to Rangers as well, but I looked at Hibs and I thought Hibs were pretty bold in respect to the fact that there was two offers on the table, one for Porteous, one for Nisbet. And they held firm rather than taking, I think, maybe 4 million combined for those two players. So, yeah, in the past, we might have been in a situation where we've gone into the transfer market and strengthened a wee bit. Hibs have had to sell a couple of players. But now, I think your point stands. I don't think Aberdeen are stronger after this window, but I think Hibs are as strong as they were before, certainly.
That's as big a statement of intent from Hibs, saying, we're going to try and chase you down for this second place, if we can, than anything. That's them saying, we think you're vulnerable. We're going to have a crack at it. We're holding on to our two biggest assets. We're turning down good money. And that's big enough for a club like Hibs to do that. They obviously think that they can chase Celtic down and maybe sneak second place. Whether it's possible, I don't know. But again, Celtic play tonight, and can you guarantee them a result in a place where they've traditionally struggled? Oh, there you go.
I know. See, the big thing for me, I'll come to yourself, Lawrence. I mean, Hibs have been guilty in the past of having a clutch of players and then allowing them to disassemble all over the place, often to Celtic Park as it happens. And I mean, we remember the potentially great side that was coming through at the time of Scott Brown and Derek Riordan et al. I think that what you've said, Tony, is spot on. It's very, very accurate. It's a statement of intent. Now, I think what will happen also is the opposite to what happened in Cham, and we'll come back to him in a second, whereby a player downs tools. I think the opposite will happen with Kevin Nisbet, because his form has been suffering at Hibs in the last month or two, and it could have been with a view to, obviously, agents are putting ideas in players' minds. Tony, there's this club after you, there's that club after you, this kind of wage has been discussed, etc. And it does turn the player's head. Now he knows he's at Easter Road to the end of the season. If he gets back to his best form, and he's a cracking player, people talking about him in the Scotland kind of setup, etc., then again, Hibs are firing on all cylinders. Where are we looking? We're looking at Lee Griffiths, who came off at half-time. You can read between the lines between Lee Griffiths' interview and Neil Lennon's interview. It's obviously due to the fact that there's a fitness issue, or he's not doing as he's being asked. You're then going down the pecking order to Ayeti, who's not got form, Klamala, who's not got form, Edward, albeit scored at the weekend. He's not hit his top form. If Hibs do and we don't, I take your point. I'm looking at that league table and I can't take anything for granted, Lawrence Connolly.
Listen, I think we've got to worry about Livingston as well. We've got 13 games to catch 13 points. They're banging form. You're dropping. Look at our January form. They're dropping more than a point a game. So if it continues like this, Livingston will overtake us, never mind Hibs and Aberdeen. That's where we're sitting. And we're leaking goals. It is the return of the sieve. Right, we're weak in the centre of defence. We identified 2 targets, don't get any of them. And don't even have a peek of a third option. It's just mind-boggling that it's kind of, we knew McKenzie was not an option early doors. As Tony says, what is it with Davies we couldn't do? If it's $2 million, to get him down, even get the pre-contract signed, make sure he signs it, then negotiate the testing. We don't do anything. We put an offer in front of him, don't get it signed. We know football. You know that player's going to walk away and go, "This is what I've got for Celtic." To his agent, can you get me better elsewhere? Because until I sign for Celtic, I'm not bound. This is the minimum I'm getting on my move. Mm-hmm. Celtic's negotiation. I don't know. Did we just leave him with a contract and say, "Look,
One word, Lawrence, one word, complacency. And I think complacency has crept into every single facet of Celtic Football Club this season. Now, I've got to say there's another guest just waiting in the wings, Kevin Graham. We're going to bring him on as a substitute. He's used to that during his playing career. We're going to bring him in because he's got a few words to say. Obviously, Kevin was on the Bulletin yesterday talking about the affiliation meeting and he wants to clear something up. So I'm going to invite Kevin into the broadcast and we'll get back to our points on the transfer business in a few moments. Kevin Graham, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Paul. Afternoon, Tony. Afternoon, Lawrence. How are you today?
All right.
Not too bad. Just a wee update. Something's caught fire this morning, which I misinterpreted from the meeting last week. I've had an update from Celtic this morning regarding the affiliation made a proposal for Celtic for the players to make Zoom calls to fans, season ticket holders. And that was made on the 18th of December. Basically, I thought they said it had been rejected. It hasn't been rejected, it just hasn't been progressed yet. So everybody is catching fire and getting on John Paul Taylor's back this morning. He can all stand down. It was my fault. I misinterpreted it, misheard what he actually says, and I think he's had a bit of a hellier morning for us. So everybody sort of moaning and shouting at JP in the club. He can stand down on this one. This has been my fault.
Or just start shouting at you, Kev.
Just start shouting at me. I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm barring myself in meetings and note taking.
Now listen, Kevin, I've got to say, fair play to you for coming on. If you made an error and you're coming in to set the record straight, fair play to you. I've not seen much responsibility being accepted by our illustrious leader this season. We'll get back to his press conference that he gave yesterday. But no, Kevin Graham, that's fair play. So basically, to clarify, there has been a proposal made to the club that the players contact some of the more vulnerable supporters this season via Zoom, and that is something that is still under consideration, something that's being progressed, I guess.
The players are not aware of it, so they haven't rejected anything. So I know we're getting on the players' back, but this is something we can't get on their backs about because they're unaware of the proposal.
I don't know if that erupted on Twitter this morning. I haven't had time to check that. Maybe I won't log into the AXOM Twitter then.
I'll be on the AXOM Twitter because JP tagged us in it. So,
Kevin,
Sorry,
you're one of these players. I think back to a game when Joe Miller was brought on as a sub and then Billy McNeill took him back off. That's happening right now before you cause any more trouble. But you will be back tonight for the game.
Yes, hopefully we'll get a victory tonight, and I will have recovered from my faux pas.
Kevin, do you want to continue with us today, or you got other things to do, other people to upset?
I'm actually working, so I need to disappear.
Right, no problem. We're going to sub you back off. Thanks for joining us, pal. Thank you.
Bye.
Fair play. If you make a wee faux pas, come on and explain yourself and take a wee bit of heat off of JP, because I don't think he needs any more heat, Tony.
See, on that note, Paul, I think it's incumbent upon Celtic players to meet the fan base anyway. See, me personally, I'd have a clause inserted into every Celtic player's contract. Every week, you either attend a supporters function or you meet a branch of the Celtic supporters after training once a week, and touch base with as many of the fans as you can, because it's a Celtic thing and it's the right thing to do. And you've got a lot spare time as a footballer, and it's a humane touch, right? Nothing better than being part of a club and seeing one of your idols come to your function, or even just turn up. And I'd make it a clause. I'd insert a clause into the contract. That's what you do. It's the Celtic thing to do.
Yeah, Lawrence, you were saying there, pal.
Tommy Burns brought that back. But obviously it's stopped now, but he brought that back when he came in as manager. You used to get players like your end of season dances or whatever, any meetings you want, just phone the club, you get a player.
The big thing.
Or two players.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I would make them do it once a week, Lawrence. No, at least once a week. And go around as many, and not just in Glasgow, go to, the Hebrides and all that. Go everywhere and meet every Celtic supporter from around the country.
Some of the players could stay in the Hebrides this season, if you ask me, Tony. But you know what I mean? Just die, don't come back. Anyway, that springs to mind, though, back in the day, because I think we're all of a certain vintage, but back in the day, I've been told from guys like Chris Morris, for example, that Billy McNeill used to have the big folder, didn't he? And it would be going through all the requests. And like you say, they might get sent to an Oban CSC night, and it was part of their duties. And, he would have it on a basis whereby you wouldn't go every week, but it would be your turn eventually. And that's where the whole story around the Fields Athen Rye came in. I'm going to remind you of this one, because Chris Morris was on an early episode of the Celtic State of Mind when it was an audio-only podcast. Very quick story. So anyway, he would go to these CSC dances, and he didn't know anything like it. He had played with Sheffield Wednesday previously, and they had nothing like that. So he was going to all these dances, and he came back one week and said to Peter Grant, I keep going to these dances, but, they expect me to sing a song, and I don't know what my party piece is going to be. So Granty says to him, listen, Chris, just stand up, right, and just start singing, Hail, Hail. He says, and before you can get anywhere, they'll all join in. And he was like, all right, great idea. So he starts doing that for a few of these dances. Then he's on international duty with the Republic of Ireland, that brilliant era side under Jack Charlton. We all loved watching him in the finals, and the journey was superb. And Niall Quinn, who's a big Celtic fan. And again, I'm not name dropping, but we had Niall Quinn on a previous episode of A Celtic State of Mind as well. So check us out on YouTube, it's in there, or on iTunes. And Niall Quinn asked him, what's it like playing for Celtic, etc. I'd have loved Niall Quinn in a Celtic jersey back then. But Chris Morris tells him this wee funny tale. But Niall Quinn's right into his... what would you call it, traditional Irish folk songs. And he says to Chris Morris, you've got to sing something better than that. So they room together, and he starts playing on this tape, and it's the Fields Athen Rye, right? So Chris Morris, the next CSC event he goes to, he's learned all the words. So he gets the mic, he's to sing a song, and he sings the Fields, right? And he claims that it was because of that the Celtic fans started singing it at games, because that one supporters club introduced it to a game. So he's having that in the folklore Celtic Football Club. Even if it's not accurate, Chris Morris is having it. He's responsible for bringing that song to Celtic Park. How good is that?
There you go. That's a great story, actually.
Superb. When did you hear that? So, I mean, I remember... People tell me maybe late 80s, early 90s. I remember the Hampden season. I can't really remember it before then. The Fields Athen Rye at Celtic Park.
I've got to be honest, I'd be stumped to say I could pin it down.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. People say that we walk on as well when we're trying to claim that we sang it first. When was the first time? I know I'm digressing a wee bit, but it's worthwhile. Somebody actually contacted me and said that their granddad was at the 7-1 game, 1957, and they started singing "Walk On" because they were mocking the Rangers fans leaving early, walk on, and they started singing it. So he was saying it would be great if this old guy got interviewed once so that we could finally say to Liverpool, we sang it first, right? I don't know if that'll ever happen, but anyway, as I say, I digress. Fair play to Kevin. It would be great to have more of a connection with the players. It's almost as if we've moved into an era, Tony, even as a journalist. Talk to us about journalism. Talk about the kind of relationships you were able to build up with the players back then when you were doing that job fairly recently.
I mean, the higher up you went in terms of footballers, it became kind of impossible to bond with players, but you can bond with the likes of Motherwell players, St Mirren players, Livingston players, Dundee United players, because you turned up in them on a kind of cyclical basis, you were there once a week, command-up players, so you get to know people. But I was always of the opinion that you don't want to become too friendly with players per se, because you might have to make that phone call one day and, conflict of interest stuff, but you can't help it. If you're seeing someone on a repetitive basis, you do form bonds. And I get very close to James McPake, who's now the manager of Dundee, get very close to Robbie Nielsen, the manager of Hearts. Guys like that who I love dearly. I get very close to John Hughes, now manager of Ross County. I was close to Tommy Wright. Because you see them regularly, and you form that relationship and bond with them. Players were always a bit more standoffish, because they were like, right, okay, they're them and us. But the ones that were, you did have that relationship with, it was terrific. I'm really friendly with Neil Lennon, as I've said before. I was friends with, you mentioned Derek Riordan earlier, and Derek Riordan gave me I actually, one of the first times I got the front, back and the inside spread of the Daily Record, Derek Riordan told me that he and Gary O'Connor trampled his uncle's ashes into Celtic Park. And you're not allowed to do that because you get so many requests. And there's footage of Derek Riordan and Gary O'Connor running onto the park when they were playing for Hibs and trampling his uncle's ashes. His uncle sadly passed away because he committed suicide. And he told me all of this. And he said the first person to phone him when he signed for Celtic was David Murray, the Rangers chairman, to say he'd signed for the wrong club, because Rangers were in for him at the time as well. I think he's one side of the family was all Hibs, the other side of the family was Celtic fans, and he did it in memory of his uncle. He signed for Celtic in memory of his uncle, and obviously he died and he got his ashes, and you see them, he's got it's a velvet pouch, and there's footage of them trampling it in, and that's not allowed because so many people want to do that, and seemingly it's not allowed, and and that was just, he sat there, I was supposed to be doing his column, and I sat in front of him and he gave me all of this, and it was wow, sensational stuff. As I say, he made the front, the back and the inside, and days like that won't come along often, but he told me because I was really friendly with him. It was just one of those, I kind of grew up watching that Hibs team. I was really friendly with Stephen Fletcher. I was friendly enough with Gary O'Connor, with guys like that, because I was in the Edinburgh beat at that time. Get to know these guys, and once they see you and they see you a lot, it becomes that kind of, how you doing? And they're human beings like you and I. They love football. You're doing a job. They're doing a job. And if you respect them, they'll respect you.
Yeah, definitely. See, the big thing, there was a massive change, obviously. We talk about modern football. People reckon that the modern game changed, maybe with the introduction of the Premier League down in England. I remember it well. Don't You Forget About Me, the adverts, all that kind of stuff, 92, 93. And we moved into the realms of players becoming untouchable. I think at Celtic, one of the big parts was when we stopped training at Barrowfield. Now, I know we needed to upgrade the training facilities. It was a long time overdue. I mean, you speak to people like, Davy Provan, who signed in the late 70s, and he says they needed to improve it back then. He tells a story about when Johan Cruyff came over with the Ajax team. I think was it 82 or 83, Lawrence, you can maybe correct me, and they thought that Celtic were winding them up when they offered them Barrowfield. They were like, no, really, where is the training facilities? They actually thought, and they're looking at it thinking, use won a European Cup training here. But obviously we know that they had to improve it, but there used to be that camaraderie, I guess, between players moving from Celtic Park up to Barrowfields. Some would drive, some would walk. I mean, a big part of it was lost when we moved. Lawrence, would you agree?
Definitely. But McCann put aside quite a few million, the board only had to match it, and we didn't. I think you gave them 5 years to match it. We didn't upgrade 10 ages to go to Lennoxtown. But yeah, watching them at Barrowfield, and nipping into Belvedere Hospital to get a cheap lunch, or if you went the wee Belvedere cafe across the road from the hospital, some of the players used to stop in and get a rolled sausage if they were walking back to the gate, to back here to get their cars. So you got to meet them and kind of see them. It was a bit more, as you said, bit more of a relationship, bit more in touch, a bit of banter with them. Definitely lost. And I know we're upgrading Barrowfield now. We had plans to upgrade it. I think there's a women's team we're going to play there. Mm-hmm. Is it 5,000 seater they're going to put in?
Interesting.
We'll see what happens from it if we go ahead. I remember when Amaral came along, no cadets, mate. There was 5,000 people.
You remember? Yeah.
I was one of them, yeah. Turning up for the training game. Then we didn't sign them. But, it was...
He had similar hair to Cadetti, but I don't think he had similar talents, Lawrence. Now, Kevin Graham's obviously now been scored off the list of fans that players will be phoning to make sure he's okay. And one of the players who won't be making any phone calls is Olivia Ncham. It's a bit, for me, looking at this situation, time was right for him to go. Some might say it should have been in the summer. But it just turns into, for me, it's a situation with a player who had so much talent. You look back to even last season, his finest moment in a Celtic jersey against Lazio away. Undoubted talent, didn't do it often enough for Celtic. But my biggest frustration is the deal that we've done. So we were talking about this yesterday, and someone had sent me a link to a French website who were talking about a 10 million euro deal, and obviously the permanent deal will be something more in the region of 4.5, which I think is there or thereabouts what we paid for him. Tony, I don't think we've done a good bit of business here with Ncham. Yeah, right for him to go, but he's regressed massively, and obviously his value's dropped hugely.
Two things. Yeah. Right, first of all, his value. Now, if somebody offers you, like Porto did, 17.5 million quid for an unhappy player, then you would have sold him, surely. If we're led to believe that that's the offer that came in. This guy was unhappy for 2 years. He should have gone then, because you weren't going to get any more money than that. That's probably the highest you could have got for a player like Ncham. But Ncham was one of the most frustrating players at the club. He had ability, he had it in abundance, but again, you go back to that phrase, he was just consistently inconsistent. Sometimes he would do great things, other times he looked as if he couldn't pass the ball 6 yards square. And you see he had his moments, he had the goal against Lazio, but they were too infrequent. He couldn't be trusted. I never once seen Ncham grab a game by the scruff of the neck, and I mean really grab it, and be that man. Arguably maybe the game where he scored the winner against Rangers, the 1-0 game, he had a decent game then, but you can't look at Ncham's highlights reel and say, I remember that game he was outstanding, I remember that game he was outstanding, because they don't exist. There was fleeting glimpses of a player who possessed some talent, and if somebody, as I say, Porto have offered Celtic that money, I don't know what they were thinking, and to sell him, or the sell-on clause is the same as what you bought him for, then why did you buy him? This was a player that was to be developed and sold for multi-millions, and then you go back to, he's now regressed. So we talked about regression the other day with Frimpong, so surely it's down to the way you're being coached, and that fault lies upon the management team and the management structure then, surely.
Another big worry for me, Tony, we've spoke about it on the podcast a few times, is the sheer raft of young players who haven't even kicked a ball for the first team, who are on their way. You've already mentioned that Liam Hughes went to Liverpool. Again, we'll get back to goalkeepers in a moment, because how much of an error is that? Because we don't really have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to goalkeepers at the moment. Liam Morrison, Bayern Munich; Barry Hepburn, Bayern Munich; Conor McBride, Blackburn Rovers; Josh Adam, Manchester City. There's talk that Okoflex has got interest in Italy, Dembele has got interest in France. Again, Lawrence Connolly, does this come back to the point that if you had someone at the helm, someone who was a focal point of the football department that you wanted to play for, that was a name and a profile and a renowned coach, then we wouldn't be losing these players? Or am I being too harsh on Neil Lennon? Is it more of a case that in Scottish football it's hard for young players to progress now from youth football to the first team with a lack of a reserve league?
I think it's a mixture of things. Not having a reserve league, they need to play to develop, and it's too big a step up between the level they're playing and the first team. So they know they're not going to develop. They've started putting out players on loan, but we Dembele, we know he's not signing a new contract. If we'd loaned him out 2-3 years ago, might have signed a new contract if he developed. If nothing else, he'd have put his value up. So we do lose and we get more money. But there's that gap, and I know we're saying like we need the Colts in the lower leagues. Just now, we're just going to keep hemorrhaging players. If they're not playing and not developing, they're not going to stay. And you don't want to keep players that aren't developing, that aren't first team ready. So I suppose it's quite a rock and hard place. So some it's the manager, some it's the coaching. But I think the main thing's the reserve league. If they're not getting challenging games to play in, it's going to develop in games. That's it. You hear about all the old players, like Court Street, kids who know the book, we've got to play in the reserves with the Lisbon Lions would drop in when they're coming back for injury. What an education we got playing with them.
Yeah.
It's not there for them. Even when you used to go and watch the reserves when it played at Barrowfield, or they'd move it up to Celtic Park, 10 minutes notice because a few of you had turned up at Barrowfield. You go and you'd see, the first teamers coming back, and you could hear them talking to young players through the game. Mm-hmm. He played against quality players. It was same, remember the Motherwell team, the coach was a manager, but he was turning out for Motherwell reserves. So you strikers were getting to play, against a really tough centre half to play against. It's just missing. I think the biggest part of it is probably the reserve league. But a lot is the manager and the coaching as well. But even if you've got the manager and the coaching right, to develop guys properly, we need competitive games that challenge them. Mm-hmm. And they're not getting that challenging at the unders level. They're just not. So you can see why they're looking elsewhere. And even in Scotland, if you look to Motherwell can make a pitch to them. Come to us, if you're any good, you're in the first team, you're playing SPFL football.
Yes, yeah.
Come to Celtic, they maybe loan you out. If you get really good, you won't get loaned out because in case we get an injury, so you just won't get loaned out and won't get competitive matches. If you're not so good, we'll loan you out because we can take the risk that we won't need to call you up to the first team. It's not a good pitch.
It's a difficult one, Lawrence. Now, this is a different situation from one that has also been spoken about on A Celtic State of Mind, whereby players like Stephen O'Donnell, Declan Gallagher, Andy Robertson, Aaron Hickey, who have been at Celtic, they've been freed, they've gone on and have had a decent career. This is a different situation. These are guys that ordinarily we would like to keep, but they're being romanced elsewhere, and these other clubs are coming in and obviously promising them something that they can't get at Celtic Park. Now, even back in the Quality Street Gang days, Lawrence, players such as Jimmy O'Rourke was in and about that, Rab Prentice, Jim Holton, even Graham Souness, believe it or not, was in and about the training sessions at that time, and Celtic didn't sign them. So it happens, but this is a slightly different situation now, I feel, whereby we're paying into the youth development system, pro youth. You've got all these academies all over the country, but they're hitting a ceiling. And at that point, they're not progressing, certainly at Celtic Park. So you think about, right, the reserve league's gone. It's a thing of the past. It'll take far too much money that clubs simply don't have to set it back up again and run it. Because that was the reason that it was, one of the reasons why it's no longer with us anyway. Clubs were struggling actually to run a second team, some clubs. So we're at a situation now where the pro youth's all in place. So what do? Do we bring the Colts teams in? And then you have the argument from teams who are in the lower reaches of Scottish football, 6th and 7th tier, saying, well, why would a Celtic or an Aberdeen side or a Rangers side leapfrog us and end up in tier 3 or tier 4? So I've spoken to our friends at Haddington Athletic. I think they're in tier 7. They've done well in the Scottish Cup this year. And the way they look at it is, well, why doesn't a club come to us and give us 4 or 5 players? I think the maximum 6, isn't it? I think the rule 6. Give us the guys for a season. They might be 17 or 18. Don't underestimate the actual level of the game at 7th tier, because it's better than youth football. You're playing up against ex-pros. You're playing up against decent footballers. So there's a few options. Tony Haggerty, you've lived through, obviously, the reserve boom. I mean, I remember Celtic Rangers games getting 12,000 at Celtic Park in Ibrox. What do you think we need to do differently looking forward? And I think this should be part of the restructure of Celtic moving into the summer.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about disconnect, on various levels, but there's clearly a disconnect from these youth players who, as Lawrence has rightly identified and you said, hit this glass ceiling because they don't have competitive football. The answer, well, everybody seems to think the answer is having colt teams in, the lower leagues. But as you've rightly pointed out, Haddington will take 4 or 5 Celtic players if they were allowed. But why should the colt teams just be parachuted in? Because it's going to only suit Celtic, Rangers, Aberdeen, isn't it, really? It's not going to suit other clubs who are ambitious and trying to work their way through that system. I use my own local team, East Kilbride FC, who've been trying for a while and failed in playoffs and stuff like that. But they managed to get through to play Celtic in Scottish Cup a few years ago, got a lot of money from that, which was terrific for them. But they're doing the right things. So why should they be punished by a Colts team or Colts team just parachuting into where they want to be, and they've spent a lot of money chasing that dream. So, there's that argument. And I can see all sides of the argument, to be honest, but how you solve it, I mean, Lawrence is bang on the money with the reserve league. It's about playing competitive football. Mm-hmm. Youth leagues are just not competitive for young players trying to make it in the game. So they have to go somewhere to get competitive football, which is why the likes of Motherwell, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, clubs like that will always hold that ace card, because they can say to a young player, you ain't going to get first team football at Parkhead or Ibrox. Come to us, because you've got the potential that we believe you have. We will go into this first team within, and they'll give them a time frame, 6 months, a year. And for a youngster, that's not a long time. If they think, great, I'll be playing first team Scottish Premiership football within 6 months and a year, that's enticing. That's why a lot of young kids decide, you know what, I'm leaving Celtic, I'm leaving Rangers, I'm going to go there and try and become a big player at an Aberdeen or Motherwell. If you're that good, you will end up, doing an Andy Robertson.
Yeah.
Resurrecting your career, and then you might find that Celtic or Rangers go back in for you and have to pay over the odds for someone who they deemed wasn't quite good enough.
I know. See, the big thing, I always remember Falkirk for a number of years, Tony, were doing so well in rearing youth, young talent, and selling them every so often, selling a player down south. And they'd done so well with that, didn't they? And now they don't even have that facility. Yeah,
they took the Forth Valley Academy away from them, didn't they? Which is where they got all their youngsters. And it's a shame, but as you say, it's just all down to cost. Clubs just can't simply afford to run a second team.
Mm-hmm. It's frustrating.
On the cost,
yes.
The SFA could regulate you've got to run a second team. Because cost is a choice thing. They've got money, but they just spend it on the first team. It's like having an AstroTurf pitch. You can afford a grass pitch, but you want to put AstroTurf in because you want to be able to pay more wages to your first team and reduce your maintenance costs. So, as a club or as a country, if we've got a vision for football that we want youth to develop, we want it paid in grass, these are things we can regulate. I mean, we regulate things like all-seater stadiums, which I don't know what that done for the development of football players. Surely we could regulate grass pitches and running a second team. That's something that's going to develop the game more than an all-seater stadium.
I totally agree with that, Lawrence. But as I say, I just think clubs, as you say, are reluctant to throw money at a second team. That's the bottom line,
A wee message coming in from Stephen O'Hare. We feel your pain, Stephen. Tough listening these days. We have got to get a new management team in now. I think today we've actually veered away from the doom and gloom a wee bit, and we've been talking about the good old days. However, we will have to talk about tonight's game and obviously the pretext of all of that. Transfers for me, it was a difficult situation because I get the feeling, even though Neil Lennon seems to believe that he's going to be part of the rebuild, that there are plans in place, and you get sent rumours all the time, don't you? WhatsApp rumours and through your DMs on Twitter, etc. You never know quite what to believe unless you get it from a really trusted source. Tony, we're in a dreadful run of form. One win in 2021. We're going to a historically difficult venue as an away day for Celtic. Tonight, we said it last week, does it make any difference what actually happens now with regards to the results? Because we've had so many Tony Mowbray moments, we've had so many John Barnes moments where you expect the breaking news the following day to be the departure of Neil Lennon. Do you honestly think that no matter what happens between now and the end of the season, he's going to be the gaffer?
It certainly seems to be shaping up that way. I pointed it out the last time I was on. Celtic have won 8 out of the last 24 competitive games. That's an exact third. I mean, that's just no good enough at any level. Never mind being the manager of Celtic. You know, and as I say, you go to Kilmarnock and Celtic traditionally have never turned up at Rugby Park. They can't play in that surface. But the results are paramount now because they have to secure second place. It's not as if they've got a massive points differential. They haven't. So they have to start screwing the nut and getting down to business and at least securing that. Mm-hmm. But the way the season has gone, it would be the ultimate failure to, not to finish as runners-up. Ultimate failure. And, you sort of sit there and you think, okay, but you don't have any faith in them securing second place at this minute in time. You don't have any faith in them getting results. Did Saturday surprise you? Not really, because there was 2 teams on the park, but one team seemed to be playing for the manager, and they weren't playing in green and white.
Someone, quite a few people actually, Tony, I was diverted, my attention was diverted there. Some of the comments are coming in telling us that during a press conference, Andre Villaboas, the Marseille manager, has resigned during a press conference. I don't know if it's got anything to do with Encham signing for Marseille, but it just shows you that all over Europe, these managerial changes are happening. But we seem to still be in purgatory at the moment, where every day we're coming in, people are calling it Groundhog Day. How do we tackle that? Because I'm not going to stop doing a daily bulletin. I think it's a necessity, and we've done it all the way through lockdown. We're going to keep doing it. The way we try and tackle it, Tony, keep it fresh. I'm going to be here most days, unfortunately for some of you, but we do try and have a team of contributors, and I think the contributors are fantastic. Different views. There's no narrative. This is a big thing. There is no narrative to AXOM. Everybody has their own view. And I've had some strong views given to me that I disagreed with, but you soften sometimes to the view and then you start looking at it differently. And that's what it's all about. The debate's brilliant. And we're going to have that every single day. We're going to keep that up. And some of the same names are still being looked at by Celtic fans. Connor Kelly comes on to tell us that it looks as though Benitez is set for Napoli. Clubs are going to, go out and get the best talent out there, and I think that's one of the biggest concerns for me. If Celtic, let's use Ben Davis as an example, Lawrence. So we fancy the player, of course we do. We offer him a deal, but we don't get the deal over the line. Someone else is out there, and that's what's happening with the managers as well. I mean, at this moment in time, I think most people will know we have got an interview coming up later on today. I'm going to say it's 6 o'clock, but I'll confirm that on the Twitter page. I've never got near Twitter today, unfortunately. But we're going to be interviewing Mark Hughes. Mark Hughes has dropped down to 17-1 in terms of the Celtic job. What I would prepare everybody for is Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen are far too respectful to fellow managers to be asked questions directly about Neil Lennon's position, but we are able to ask him a question which will give you an idea as to what his aspirations would be should Celtic come and ask him if he wants to come up the road. So it's a very interesting interview. It's with a guy who I've done a lot of research on recently because I remember him as a player. He was an astonishing player, Mark Hughes, but looking into his managerial career, I think when when we started talking about Mark Hughes, it probably was 70-30 against, but as time has developed, people are looking at what he has achieved in management, and I get probably the comments maybe 50-50 now. People would, some wouldn't. It's all about opinions. What's your thoughts yourself, Lawrence? Obviously we'll be hearing from Mark Hughes at about 6 o'clock tonight.
Blackburn to City was the most expensive manager then, most expensive compensation fee for a manager going out to City, something like that, wasn't it?
World record. Yep.
World record. He was absolutely flying then. I actually didn't think he'd done enough to get sacked by City. He wasn't performing badly, but City just, they had so much money, wasn't it? They just, well, you're not the best manager in the world, so we'll sack you. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not perceived to be the best manager in the world, you get sacked. He's been kind of mixed bag since then, stuck at Stoke for a while. You know, what a player, you know. He was deadly in the air, lethal on the deck. You know, I think his teams, anytime I've seen them, you know, they're attacking teams. I think he'd be a definite contender. You know, we'd be daft to shove his CV in a draw, wouldn't we? You know, if it comes in.
Going back to Rafa Benitez, yeah. See, the big thing for me with Mark Hughes, looking at the managerial career, he went to Wales. He was still a player when he went to Wales, and he retired from playing for Wales, but he was still playing at the time for Blackburn Rovers. And he explains tonight, you know, the state that Wales were in at that time and what they had to implement, and etc. And that happened a few times in his career, which I find interesting, because I think that Celtic need a bit of a repair job. I think somebody needs to come in and look at the whole situation, be that Mark Hughes or someone else. I think it needs to be done. Interestingly enough, you know, Blackburn Rovers, he was flying, got them into Europe, done really well, first FA Cup semi-final since 1974. Man City bring him in, world record compo, but then there was a change in ownership at Man City. So you're looking at his entire career, and we talk all about it tonight. But again, what I wanted to try and tap into, Tony, was what is Mark Hughes and Mark Bowens, because they're a team. You know, they work together. Bowen's the coach. What's their philosophy? How do they instill a mentality in players? You know, what style? What would their plans be? What's their European aspirations? I've asked these types of questions. Would they be a good fit for a club like Celtic? Is basically where I was going with that one.
I think you look at Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen, as you say, they come as a pair. Brendan Rodgers and Chris Davis came as a pair. So Martin O'Neill, Steve Walford, John Robertson, a threesome. But when you see that kind of structure, and these guys follow those same managers around all their career, and they're successful, you know they've got something. So I think as Lawrence has rightly said, you can't just put that CV in a drawer and say, "Nah, no, thank you." You know, if you think Mark Hughes would be an upgrade on the current managerial regime, then you have to treat him seriously as a candidate. 50-50 out there, but when you start outlining what Mark Hughes has achieved, he's actually done very well as a manager. So he has to be, as you say, in the running or in the betting. Do the Celtic fans want him? Then opinion split. But after listening to the podcast tonight, then they might get a different view of Mark Hughes. You know, at the moment they probably think, he's trading on his name. He was a great player once, and he had, you know, a success at Blackburn before he, you know, and it's no disrespect to Mark Hughes that Man City went in a different direction. They sacked him because he wasn't the best manager in the world, as Lawrence has said. You know, that's not his fault. You know, so,
people instantly say, Tony, you remember it yourself. But he bought Robinho. 32.5 from Real Madrid, and you've got to realise, and you can't pick and choose the players that you claim as being the ones you've identified. But again, did Mark Hughes buy Robinho? Was it really Mark Hughes that wanted to break world records? Of course it wasn't. But I'll tell you who he did buy. He bought Vincent Kompany, but he brought in a host of players. Kolo Toure was a Mark Hughes signing. They did okay.
A Vincent Kompany that Celtic could have signed.
Yeah.
Remember when we played against them?
Yeah. Champions League.
Cracking game. Aye.
Liam Miller had a stormer.
Yep.
Remember when Celtic were notified of Kompany's availability, and I think it was for, somebody might correct me, but a couple of million quid, and the boy was a player. No foresight, no forward thinking. You look at Kompany now, and he's one of them. We could have signed him. The Celtic's history and litany of players, there's a litany of players like that. We could have signed him at an optimum time. Vincent Kompany was every inch of footballer we handled. He was young, he was raw, but he was the real deal. He was a powerful presence. at the back of the pack, and as Lawrence has alluded, what we struggled for years, central defenders, centre halves, and here's this guy you're offered. You say, do you know what, this guy's available. See if your scouting network's right. See if your management structure's right. You don't need to be, you don't need to be a genius to identify that he's a player. And you played against him. Somebody notifies you and says, you can sign him. And don't do it.
Aye, exactly. It makes a very good point. It's something I'm pretty passionate about as well, because I speak a lot about youth football on one of the other shows on A State of Mind with the Porty Boot Room, Tony. Could there not be a cross-border under-21 competition? You wonder what the clubs are looking at, because there seems to be a fair bit of resistance with the Colts team within the pyramid as well. But I think a very good point is coming in from Jinky. Jinky J coming in through Twitter. Celtic and Rangers teams would provide a decent attendance in the lower leagues. Now, again, as you quite rightly said, Lawrence, obviously the Quality Street Gang, this isn't a plug because you can't buy the book, it's not available. I'm not trying to plug the book, but I did find it very interesting that back in 68, because the Quality Street Gang were so good, and Steen was concerned that they wouldn't develop like he wants them to develop, because you're trying to dispossess a Lisbon Lion of their Celtic jersey. So he knew it wouldn't be a wholesale 8 guys coming in at the same time, although he thought that they were good enough. He made a proposal to put the second Celtic side in, and at that time it was only Division A, Division B, so there was only 2 leagues, so they would play in the second league. And what they did to try and sell the idea, almost like a kind of like travelling roadshow, they would take a Celtic reserve team to the likes of Recreation Park at Alloa, and they would go and they would play all these different teams. And what Steen was trying to show is not only can we compete, because they were beating these teams, they were actually defeating these clubs, but the attendances that these clubs were getting was vastly superior to their average attendance. And that's because if Celtic weren't playing, or if they were playing away from home, they might go and just nip in and see Celtic reserves. So that I think is a good point, and it would happen, but I see the resistance coming from the lower leagues, and I don't just mean within the top 4 divisions. So will it ever happen, do you think, in our lifetime, that we have the B teams playing? They've done it in Spain for years, they've done it in other countries, Tony.
They do it in Holland, don't they? The Eerste division, where a young Ajax and a young AZ and a young PSV, that's what they're called. They're called Jong Ajax, Jong PSV, to let you know there is more or less a reserve team, but they're playing in a competitive league because all the other teams are trying to get into the top flight, the Eredivisie in Holland. So it works there. I'm not against the logic of it working. I think Lawrence is right. It could work. I just think there's a lot of hostility towards it. But some of the benefits you've outlined there is it would bring, the lower leagues would get better attendances. But I think those clubs are ambitious within themselves. They don't want to be leapfrogged, in their own quest to make it into the pyramid. So, you have to try and balance that argument, don't you? But if it works in Holland, then why can't it work here?
We need to do something, don't we? That's a big thing. Let's make a change. Let's be bold. Back then, when it was refused, it came down to a vote from Partick Thistle, believe it or not. And Partick Thistle were concerned that their attendances might be affected by Celtic fans going to watch the B teams. But there you go. That was a situation back then. I think it's something we need to think about. Jeff Payne comes in to say Mark Hughes certainly has the experience, but he's been out of a job for a while. He has been out of football for a couple of years. One of the years was self-imposed, but he goes on to tell you obviously COVID knocked his schedule out the way a wee bit as well. But it's a name that's out there. It's gathering a bit of pace when you look at the bookies' odds. Lawrence, if it's an ever-changing situation, Rafa probably will go to Napoli. If I was to ask you now, who would be the right man or the right team for you? What are you thinking? I know this is an ever-changing situation.
I heard Tony talk about it before. You've got to aim for the top. Look at the boy, is it Allegri, 10 Juve 85 titles? He's out of luck. We can bring him in and say you're putting yourself in the shop window here. 3 good years at Celtic, you'll get a top 6 club in England the next time it comes up, and you'll get a large compensation package. So someone like that, I don't know, maybe Desmond's holding out for the summer, because COVID's going to change the football landscape this summer. There's a lot of clubs going to be short of money. So maybe he's thinking there'll be a lot more managers on the market. will the structure of leagues change? Who knows where we're going to be come the summer when clubs are completely out of money? How many clubs are going to go to the wall across Europe? And what kind of effect it's going to have, and what kind of plan UEFA have to make football more attractive and more sustainable? I don't know. I mean, we pulled out the Atlantic League. What did we do that for? And you've got to think we pulled out of that because there's something else in the background. We're not just saying no to that to just stay in Scotland, surely. So, for me, yeah, but back to the question, it'd be the guy at the top. I'd go with the ex-UD manager.
Well, Tony, if, because obviously Kevin coming on earlier on today to explain that he wasn't 100% accurate in what he was saying about people from Celtic Forum fans, if you got a phone call and that phone call was from Dermot Desmond, what would you ask him?
Myself personally?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I would ask, I would ask him to tell us if there's going to be a new manager at the club, who it is and what's the plan moving forward. Because there is so much disconnect from the top to, to the first team, to the fans. It's unbelievable. And they've brought it on themselves. This disconnect's a bugbear of mine. And I was going to start, I didn't realise we were going to talk about transfer business, but I was going to start with, I implore the board and the management of players of Celtic FC. What they've done this season has just been incredible. And to misquote Thatcher, I'm going to flip Thatcher's 1979 speech on its head. Because where there was union, they brought discord. Where there was truth, they brought error. Where there was faith, they brought doubt. And where there was hope, they brought despair. That's where the Celtic fans are at this moment in time. That's why you see Facebook and Twitter is an absolute cesspit. Celtic fans it's a form of cannibalism now. They're eating and chewing and gnawing away at each other because of what the board and management and the players have done this season. It's been mismanaged at the top. They've been underachieving on the park, and the players have been underperforming. And now the fans are turning on each other, and it's appalling and it's horrible to watch. You win with humility, you lose with dignity. This isn't the way. And that's what I'd say to Dermot Desmond. And you've caused this. You guys have caused this. Celtic have lost their identity almost. They've lost their heart and soul, and they've totally lost their way this season. And I get back to that speech that I gave there. That's exactly what has happened. And the fans they're bearing the brunt of it. And now they're turning on each other, and it's just not the way to behave. I can't get my head around it. You've probably seen the latest Twitter thing with the Neil Lennon and the block on the road sign. Mm-hmm. I mean, really? Regardless of what you think about Neil Lennon, you have to respect him for what he's done for the club and what he's achieved. We've spoke many times on this forum that we believe his time's up. But to stop coming away with these kind of memes and getting that groundswell to kind of, it's fervour, it's anger. We understand you're angry. But there's better ways and means of portraying that. You have to be intellectual and articulate your thoughts and your feelings. Not everybody feels the same way about Neil Lennon. There'll still be people out there who think he should still be in the job. He'd have a hell of a job convincing me, but it's their opinion, and I respect that. They have to respect ours and say, well, we think it's time that he left. But this the way the fans are, it's vile, it's hatred, it's poison. Mm-hmm. I expect better from Celtic fans, to be honest. I'm not blaming Celtic fans. The root cause of this has been been the board, the management and the players for everything that's happened this season. I can understand them venting their spleen and their frustrations. But honestly, I'd show Dermot Desmond that because he's probably blissfully unaware of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. See, the big thing for me, Tony, right, what you've said, and it's resonating throughout the comments. I can see loads of comments coming in. I think what you've said there are the words that many Celtic fans have felt for some time, and you've obviously put them together there in a perfect manner, which, quite frankly, I'm not going to try and follow up. It's like trying to, come on a festival bill after the Rolling Stones in their pomp. It's not going to happen. But the next question for me would be, Lawrence Connolly, how do you get back to connecting with your fans? Because I think, Tony, what he said there is 100% correct. How do you get back to a situation where it's no longer us and them, and then obviously the way that it's fragmented within the fan base can heal and get better from there?
I think it's all down to communication. There's been a complete lack of it, which has left a vacuum. And Tony's touched that. Fans are fighting also because there's a vacuum. There's nothing coming back. The club just treating it, it is almost treating us with contempt. There is nothing, there's no communication or any meaningful communication. There's no plan of a way forward, what we're going to do, what we're trying to achieve. They're just leaving an emptiness for people to speculate on. It's not good. They need to get back to having some kind of fans forum. We've touched on it here. They've got the technology now. This is the easiest time they can communicate with a fan base. We've got the Pass to Paradise. They can sign in, they can do a bigger version of this. They can talk to people, players on Zoom calls. Apparently it's not in front of the players yet. If that was November and it's not in front of the players yet, but in February, what is it they have to plan for 3 and a bit months before putting it in front of the players? It's not a hard ask. Listen, players, COVID's going on, right? That's not going to be news to the players. We've got some people are struggling with COVID. That's not going to be news either. Would you mind having a Zoom call with some of our more vulnerable players, even if it's a pre-recorded message from them? Say, would you mind doing a wee pre-recorded message we want to send out to everyone called Kevin? We can look through a database and go, everybody gets a message addressed to Kevin, it's called Kevin. But we are 3 and a bit months down the line and it's not being progressed to the players. Where's the block in that? I don't even see it as a difficult decision to put in front of the players.
No, I agree with that. And you know what? I'd probably go one step further and I wouldn't ask. Under the circumstances, I actually wouldn't be asking the players. But Tony, I'll throw the question back to yourself. What do you expect will happen from here? Where is the charm offensive? When is it going to begin from the club?
It has to begin now. Surely the moment for it to begin is long past, but how much more can they put up with? How much more do they want to put up with? We're going to limp to the end of this season, and they're probably hoping that we'll secure second place. It's no guarantee. What happens if they go to Rugby Park tonight and get beat? You're under, and there's no guarantee that Celtic are going to win tonight. The Dubai trip was meant to be this bonding session, which was supposed to be your last hurrah, and you're going to try and have a tilt at trying to rescue this, a salvage operation on the wreckage of a season. It's been anything but. It's been worse since Dubai, which proved to me that there was cliques in the team. Mm-hmm. It was clear. But this Dubai trip that they spent $400,000 on, lavish $400,000 on, when there's people at the club who've been furloughed, which is far and away removed from the ethos and the foundations what the club was built on, far and away removed from it. This was supposed to sort everything out, supposedly, and they've come back from Dubai and they've not won a game, have they?
One game at home against Hamilton.
One game at home.
That's the thing. See tonight, I'm actually preparing myself for the worst. So we will be live pre-match, half-time and post-match. Before we go live, as I was saying before, we have been speaking to Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen. We're not doing a recruitment drive for anybody, but I think out of all the candidates I've seen, they certainly are people that I was able to organise an interview with, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy that. I'm hoping to have it out by 6 o'clock tonight. If I can bear to get onto Twitter after Kevin Graham's faux pas has probably sent my notifications through the roof. But he did come back on and apologise, and let's apologise as a platform for any misinformation that was put out yesterday on the Bulletin. All that's left for me to say is, as well as thanking everybody for getting involved in the comments, it's been a very busy afternoon for us, is thank you to Lawrence Connolly and also to Anthony Haggerty for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.